Shruti ma'am, shall we begin?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we can start.
We can start.
Yes,
Okay, so give me the YouTube link. You message
yes, ma'am.
me.
I will send it to you.
Okay. Katyani ma'am, I think we can begin.
Yeah. Am I audible, Shruti ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second day of Faculty Development Program conducted by Jain College, Vasvi Road, Vivipuram campus, which was established in the year 2011 and it's affiliated to Bangalore City University. It's a part of Jain group of institutions which has been steadily paying its way to the achieve academic excellence. It believes in imparting value based education with strong foundation in academic research, human values, and other courses are taught to equip students to deal with real issues of life as well as face the future challenges with confidence and courage. The FDP, the Faculty Development Program, which we are organizing with internal quality assurance with the in association with the English department. It is organizing a 5-day online program on effective curriculum implementation, focusing on new textbooks for the fourth semesters, Insight 4 and Confluence 4. The main objectives of this FTP it is to equip the students and the teachers who are teaching the Insights 4 and Confluence 4. The main objectives are to equip the teachers with better understanding and skills on the various themes and topics covered under these textbooks. And to also enhance understanding of the teachers on using the textbooks to highlight human values and sensitize students to social values that the textbook talk about in the pieces. The main purpose of this textbook is to aid the teachers to help students build language skills for future job opportunities. And finally, to help the teachers to improvise teaching skills, learning environment to foster better language skills and perspective. These are our main objectives. And now I would like to invite our principal, Naveen sir. Welcome to the second day FTP, sir. And I would
Ah,
like
thank you, Kaltyani madam. Thank you so much. You can continue, madam.
Thank you, sir. So now I would like to introduce our main chief guest today, the resource person, Dr. R.V. Sheila. Ma'am, welcome to you, ma'am. Dr. R.V. Sheila is has a PhD in applied linguistics from Bangalore University in the year 2000 from under the guide and with the title of Contrastive Linguistics Approach to English Language Teaching at PU level and degree levels. Madam has a total 3 decades of teaching experience. Initially, she served in Vijaya College, Baswangudi, and for the past 30 years, for the past 23 years, she's been serving in Malleshwaram, 18th Cross, MES College. Madam has many achievements, academic achievements to her credit. Madam has been a textbook committee for the first language English textbook for the 9th and the 10th standard, and the first and the second PUC English textbooks in the year 2003, and the second year BA BSc General English in the year 2010. And Madam also has authored several study material for first and second year degree General English correspondence courses. Currently, Madam is the member of the Optional English Textbook Committee 2019 to 2022 for Bangalore Central University. Madam R.B. Sheila is a chairperson for the General English Textbook Committee BCom 2019-2021, Bangalore Central University. Madam, not only about the textbook, but Madam also has has also done lots of research and consultancy jobs there. Madam is in a PhD in applied linguistics. She has conducted a minor research project sanctioned by the UGC in the 11th plan on the topic General English syllabus in the post-IT scenario in colleges affiliated to Bangalore University. Madam also has guided 6 students for MPhil, and she has guided 2 research scholars for PhD to secure PhD degrees. And she has conducted various workshops for the PU teachers, and she has been serving as a master resource person for various occasions there. Sheila ma'am has attended for more than 50 state and national international seminars, conferences in Bangalore, in Mysore, Mangalore, Erode, Trichy, and presented papers as well. Madam has presented papers not only in India but even out of the country. So in world conferences at RELC, SEA, MEO, Singapore, Perth, and Australia. Madam has 28 articles published to her credit, and she also has a Regional Institute of English journal, international peered reviewed journal, and thematic journal, and research scholar, verbal art, and Pune research. Madam has many articles published even in the ELT, that is the English language teaching. And she currently, Madam is also the member board of studies for Mount Carmel College, Bangalore Central University. And she also is a panelist at REVA and our own university, Jain University. So we would like to welcome you, ma'am, and we look forward for all your deep insights and the various kinds of things which has gone into making the BCom 4th semester English textbook. So over to you, Dr. Sheila. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot. That was indeed a very elaborate one. And I thank you for inviting me to be on the panel for the discussion of these newly released textbooks. Hope I'm audible. Yes. Good evening, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to be a part of this program to deliberate on Insights 4, the newly released textbook for 4th semester BCom from Bengaluru City University. Respected Principal, Dr. Naveen Kumar, esteemed staff members of Jain College, enthusiastic participants, and my teacher friends. It is indeed our second meeting, maybe in the last few days. So for some of you who have attended the previous meeting conducted by webinar, as you can call it, by the Jain Evening College, this will be a kind of repetition, but this would definitely go beyond it, as this is a part of the faculty development program, and we are going to deal with 2 pieces in detail. So I'm just trying to set the expectations right. Of course, you know how we as teachers, we do look forward to a very intellectual kind of a deliberation whenever a new textbook gets released. All of us are aware of the fact that we are living in unprecedented times with the pandemic COVID-19 raging in the world, and its impact on higher education has been immense. In fact, it is with technological platforms that we are able to make some kind of a progress in these challenging times. I'm thankful to the principal and organizers of Jain College for having realized the need for a faculty development program on the newly released 4th semester BCom textbook, Insights 4. The teaching fraternity appreciates this venture as it provides an insight into Insights 4 through these deliberations on an online mode, as the conduct of a seminar or a workshop is prohibited by the SOP, Standard Operating Procedures, in times of a pandemic like this. The session is going to be roughly divided into 3 parts. Part 1 will speak about conceptualization of the text. Part 2, analysis of 2 poems. And the 2 poems that analysis are first 2, that is To My Valentine by Ogden Nash and To the Others by Jack Davis. Part 3 will be question answer session. So to start with our discussion of the textbook, it has been a 2-year journey for the members of the textbook committee that resulted in the creation of 4 texts for BCom course. Insights 4 is the last one in the series. I would like to express my thanks and gratitude to Dr. Chitra Panikar, the chairperson of Board of Studies, PCU, and Professor M. Shivaprasad of Sri Vivekananda College, Bengaluru, who is a member of the Board of Studies as well as a member of the textbook committee, for their suggestions and interventions during the making of these texts. I would like to mention that we also gathered feedback from the practicing teachers, though in an informal way, which helped us to make our next text better. As we conceptualized the text, we had a discussion with Dr. Manu Chakravarti, a retired professor of English from NMK Orville College, and a film critic who very rightly suggested that the general English textbook for BCom students must deliver the message of ethics in business. So maybe in times of consumerism, globalization, materialization of things, and also commercialization of education, we as textbook committee members also felt that this is the need of the hour. Maybe our commerce students need to be taught about certain human values, social values, and also ethics in business and the kind of social responsibility that they will have to bear on their shoulders when they become adults. I'm happy to state that the selections made for all the 4 semesters have this as the underlying principle. From Khalil Gibran's On Buying and Selling in the first semester to Arthur Miller's On My Sons in the 4th semester, the message of ethics in business is emphatic. As the English language course ends with the 2nd year for commerce students, care has been taken to provide them an exposure to a variety of literary forms like poetry, short stories, essays, extracts, and short plays from Indian, British, American, and African writers. Presenting variety and diversity in literature has been our motto. An organic gradation has been maintained in terms of plays, as 2nd sem has an extract from the play Hayavadana by Girish Karnad. 3rd sem has a 1-act play, Suppressed Desires by George Graham Cook and Susan Glaspell, while 4th semester has a full-length play of 3 acts, All My Sons, by the American playwright Arthur Miller. In addition to the poetry selections, a 3-act play, All My Sons by Arthur Miller, is prescribed for the course. It is a play that deals with the themes of responsibility, death, and American dream. It presents the conflicts of the protagonist, Joe Keller, at multiple levels like personal, familial, and social. It also drives home the message of sin and retribution or atonement. It emphasizes the underlying principle of our text's ethics in business. Then, as there is going to be a complete session on this play, as I have heard, I'm not going into the analysis part of the play today. Coming to the language component, it is conceived with the intention of preparing the learners to cultivate language competence and job skills required to compete in the global job scenario. In the first year, the texts deal with language skills, that is sentence level onwards, and vocabulary in terms of idioms and phrases, derivatives, homonyms, and homophones. In the second year, writing skills like letter writing, book review writing are given importance. Job skills like writing resume and cover letter, presentation skills and interview skills are also covered. One cannot undermine the importance of email writing and social media skills in today's world. And that's how we felt there was a need for us to include chapters or units on social media awareness as well. That's how there is a unit in our language component of the textbook to create media awareness and knowledge of do's and don'ts on social media. Coming to the weightage of marks, the weightage of marks for the literary component is 40, and for the language component, it is 30, and internal assessment marks is also 30. Internal marks have to be awarded on the basis of 3 components as follows. So this has been given in the textbook. It has been given in the model question paper as well at the end of the textbook, so that teachers will not find it difficult to follow the pattern. So assignment or project will be assessed for 15 marks, test for 10 marks, attendance 5 marks, and totally it would be 30 marks for internal assessment. And I would like to draw the attention of our teachers to a change that is found in the question paper that needs a mention here. The language component is the first section and the literature component is the second section as per our new pattern. If our teachers can recall, you know how in the previous year question papers, it would be the other way around, meaning 40 marks of literature component would be section A in the question paper, and 30 marks of language component would be section B, while it has been reversed in the new pattern, and of course with a reason. This change was envisaged in order to help the students who usually complete the easy part of the paper first and give the rest of their time to writing lengthy answers for the literature component. I must say that this is just for the sake of practical convenience that we have done that. As teachers attending valuation semester after semester, we have observed how students do go wrong in maybe writing their main question numbers, writing their sub question numbers, and sometimes messing up with the numbers of questions and all that. And at the end of it, you know how they start writing lengthy answers to the literary component, right, for 10 mark, 5 mark questions, and at the end of it complain that they did not have time to answer the easy questions found in the language component. So in order to reverse that tendency, we thought, and of course I must admit that it was Dr. Chitra Panikar's idea that we have to reverse this order, and language component, which can be completed in about 20 minutes to half an hour, can be given in the first part of the paper, and literature component can follow it. So I request the teachers to follow this pattern in the coming years. It is also imperative to state that Bengaluru City University came up with the novel idea of soft text after trifurcation. So post trifurcation, it was the then Vice Chancellor, Dr. Jaffet, who gave the idea of soft text, that is, the e-version of the text. This revolutionary change from hard copies to hard copies or printed text to the e-version of textbooks drew a lot of concern and resentment from the teachers initially. And in fact, I was also one of the teachers who felt there was a lot of convenience in handling a printed textbook rather than the e-version of the text, because e-version does come with its own limitations and disadvantages. I think every one of you agree with me. But then I think today we are in no position to resist it, right? So it was quite understandably so. Nevertheless, as if it were a divine coincidence, today we speak of its advantages. E-text became a boon in times of the pandemic. As the texts were uploaded to BCU portal, both students and teachers had the facility of downloading it for use. And sitting in our own homes in times of lockdown, social restrictions, and online classes, e-texts provided ready access on smartphones, and needless to say that it was cost effective. I would like to state that the committee has put its best efforts to prepare a text which can develop the literary sensibility in the students and stimulate their thinking and imagination. And of course, I think I have heard some of the teachers who have expressed their concern here, stating that some of the texts which have been prescribed, because it's already about a fortnight since the new text got released. And when once the teachers got to know that the Old Man and the Sea, All My Sons, or even the Time Machine, these were the new texts introduced for various streams, and teachers came up with their feedback, maybe the first feedback as it were, even before they got into the text or even before they experimented with it for one semester. They did say how these are tough texts and how can tough literature be taught to students and think that that will help them to learn the language. And here I would like to say that these are the texts which need to be introduced to the students at least at the graduate level. So we are speaking of second year degree students, fourth semester students, and in a year or so, these are the youngsters who are going to face the world off guard, isn't it? In just 1 year's time, these people will pass out of the portals of the college with their degree certificates in hand and aspirants of good and great jobs, and whose responsibility is it to prepare such students for the expectations of the job market. And when we are teaching literature, we are not just using literature to teach language. And I am, for one, a person who thinks that literature and language have to be given equal importance and one need not ride over the other. Language need not ride over literature interests, or literature cannot ride over the language interests. So they need to be given equal importance, but then they are also embedded very closely for us to remove them from one another. This is one truth we need to realize. So irrespective of all the intellectual talk or intellectual differences, ideological perceptions, I think at undergraduate level, we need to realize how we are doing twin jobs here. That is, exposing them to good literature of the world and not narrowed down to their own local context, right? So texts are not narrowed down to their own local context, but they are given an exposure to a wide variety of texts, as I already mentioned, Indian, American, African, and Nigerian, because we also have a piece from Chinua Achebe in our second sem insights too, right? So, and language component is not really seen with any secondary importance, because as a teacher in the classroom, it becomes the responsibility of the teacher to deal with both these sections with equal importance and integrity. I use the word integrity deliberately here. Then, literature also tries to stimulate their imagination, opens up their thinking, and at the same time, it expands the horizon of their knowledge. So, it also helps them to cultivate the skills of language. The texts also help them to cultivate the skills of language in an age where the demands on these youngsters is quite high. Yes. So if you compare what our youngsters need to know today to be able to crack competitive exams or to be able to make it to high paying good jobs, then you realize how it is our responsibility to prepare them for it. And to take a look at the scenario, because this I have been thinking upon for some time now. We are only talking about BCU students here, right? But then let us also take into consideration the general picture in the state, in the country. So when you take it that way, these students from BCU will be competing with students who have come from maybe central level, maybe Kendriya Vidyalayas, who have actually honed the skills of these students in a good way. And at the same time, there are also students who have come from excellent private organizations and institutions, which have given them which have actually given good inputs in terms of knowledge as well as skills. Let not our students, in comparison to them, hold back anymore. So with that intention, I think we have to take up this responsibility of exposing them to good literature and also hone their skills in such a way that they also can compete with standard aspirants. Okay, in the world of information, communication, and technology, the demand on such students is actually more. And we somehow seem to think that technology is making a bad impact, because whenever we speak like this, we talk of social media, right? Yes, but then we also need to see the advantages that we have from social media as well. And our youngsters are much more exposed to it, and they also are more capable in taking in maybe your good suggestions and good interventions when they find that you have their interest in mind. Yes, they are after all 18, 20-year-olds. And these students definitely trust their teachers. The literature component comprises of poetry written in 20th century on the preoccupying themes of preoccupying themes of the time, like colonial oppression and ethnic identity, racism and discrimination, social and cultural upheavals, capitalism and class divide. The poems prescribed are indeed powerful enough to make a lasting impact on the readers. So, you know how text becomes a pretext in the hands of a good teacher. And when once the teacher is in the classroom, the teacher becomes the whole focus of the students, and a teacher can deliver goods if he or she is passionate about the job. And I think it is that kind of a passion that we look for in our teachers. Now I begin with the second part of my presentation. And here I will be analyzing the first 2 poems in the text, To My Valentine by Ogden Nash and To the Others by Jack Davis. So we'll begin with it. To introduce the poet, Frederick Ogden Nash, born in 1902 and lived till 1971, was an American poet known for light verse, popular for his unconventional rhyming schemes and sense of humor. Born in New York and later settled in Maryland. And his interests varied from giving television shows, radio shows, writing poetry, etc. And he has produced 20 volumes of verse in his 40-year career. And whenever he was not writing poetry, he was busy with his television shows, and he drew people maybe like a good orator and a comedian. And many of his quotes are extremely popular. He won the Pulitzer Prize for literature. And this poem that we are going to read is written by him. So first, let me give a reading to the poem and then discuss it in detail. More than a catbird hates a cat, or a criminal hates a clue, or the Axis hates the United States, that's how much I love you. I love you more than a duck can swim, and more than a grapefruit squirts. I love you more than a gin rummy is a bore, and more than a toothache hurts. As a shipwrecked sailor hates the sea, or a juggler hates a show. As a hostess detests unexpected guests, that's how much I love you. I love you more than a wasp can sting, and more than the subway jerks. I love you as much as a beggar needs a crutch, and more than a handmaid gets. I swear to you by the stars above and below, oaths, perjurious oaths. Yes, Lord's perjurious oaths, that's how you are loved by me. This is the poem, and we'll take up the discussion of the poem now. As you must have seen, it has that sense of rhythm and that sense of novelty, and at the same time, the typical Nash kind of comparisons and rhyme. We'll dwell on it in detail. In To My Valentine, the poet explores the theme of love and dedication through hyperbolic statements to validate his devotion. So look at the hyperbolic statements, exaggerated statements that he makes in order to drive home the truth that he loves his lover so much. The mood and the tone of the poet are both joyous and optimistic. Even though some of those metaphors that are used in the poem are a little embarrassing and sometimes irking, you find the tone and mood of the poem to be quite joyous and optimistic. Throughout the 5 stanzas, the poet gives several comparisons which appear to be negative, yes, on the look of it. When you try to read the poem for the first time, say like a wasp that gives a sting, or maybe the grapefruit squirting, or a toothache that hurts. These are all the metaphors that he uses in the poem. And on appearance, they may look like negative comparisons, but in essence, they are positive. Let us see how. He also uses a refrain, I love you. That's how much I love you. And that's how much I love you. This is a kind of line. This is the kind of line that he repeats in the poem. And as we know, this use of refrain gives a sense of rhythm and also emphasis to the line, to the thought that is projected in the poem. Then the poet defamiliarizes his readers with the familiar perceptions of love. And as readers and as people, we are so much acquainted with all the positive things that are associated with love. It could be the beautiful red rose, or it could be the innocent smile, or it could be the beauty of nature. So we have hundreds of comparisons made by our authors and writers, and particularly we, the teachers of English literature, we do know for ages we have been studying it. And so familiar images of love are given a go by here. And that is the kind of I can say change that Ogden Nash brings into his poem. And that's where Nash is different from other poets. So he defamiliarizes his readers with the familiar perceptions of love. So love for him need not be compared to beauty or nature or goodness or melody or deliciousness, whatever. For him, there are other comparisons through which he can actually tell his lover that he loves her intensely. Then, the so-called negative comparisons also bring out the intensity of his love. Maybe this is for the first time. Maybe readers listen to a thing like this, because human society, of course, always thinks of being on the right side of it. And they want to speak good things, do good things, bring in only good comparisons, talk positively, whatever it be. But here is a poet who can use something negative also for a positive purpose, right? A negative comparison also for a positive purpose that underlines his poem. So the so-called negative comparisons also bring out the intensity of his love, of course, with a pointed reference to the unpleasant happenings in the real world. So don't take Nash so easily. And it's not just about love he is talking. He is also talking about other unpleasant experiences of the world in comparison to love. And it's a kind of, I must say, a twin objective that is fulfilled. One, pinpointing certain unpleasant things of life, but then making use of them to pledge that his love is more intense than all these things which give you an intense experience. The poem is light-hearted, humorous, and has a song-like rhythm. As I said, the use of refrain, and look at the end rhyme that is used here. Cat, as it rhymes with states, clue, you, swim. And then, of course, you have squirts and hurts. Then see. Yeah, there's no rhyme here. And then you have jerks and irks. And look at the change of spelling that he brings out here, because he wants it to rhyme with loath. He wants it to go with loath, not rhyme with loath. So loaths, perjurious oaths, loaths and oaths, they are given the same spelling as it were. So Nash is known for such coining of new words, changing and twisting the existing words to suit his purpose, and also for his asymmetrical lines and bringing in things that maybe readers may not think of, something very new, something very different. In the first stanza of the poem, he describes how much he loves in very clever statements. So, what are the statements he makes? More than a cat bird hates a cat, or a criminal hates a clue. Of course, a criminal who does some crime does not want to leave behind a clue. And unwittingly, if he has done so, he would hate such a clue which will give him away, right? So, he would hate that clue. And the Axis hates the United States. So these three things are the comparisons to the love of the poet. And he says, look at the intensity of these three comparisons and think of poet's love, which is more intense than this. So these purposefully bring out the intensity of his love. And the catbird's hate for a cat and a criminal's hate for the clue is as much as his love is for his lover. Axis powers versus the United States. He juxtaposes their hate with his love. So how much this Axis power hated United States power and domination. So the intensity of that emotion is compared with his love for his lover. He also compares his love to the bore of gin rummy, intensity of a toothache, and a duck's love for swimming, and squirting of a grapefruit. And these are things which imperatively happen and bring out a very intense experience of life. But how intense is poet's love? More intense than this. That's what he is trying to say. In the third stanza, he compares his love to the sailor who hates the stormy sea that wrecks the ship. No wonder. No one would ever like a stormy sea that would wreck his ship. And there is a good example of a simile when he states that his love is like a juggler's hate. Juggler, a person who tries to throw and hold on to certain things, and of course, adjusting his positions. If he is pushed, shoved aside, you know how the game goes for a toss. And he would hate such a show. And a hostess detest for unexpected guests. And I think all of us do realize this. If you have cooked for some people and there are some more people who come with them, first thought that you would have in your mind is, okay, how do I manage? And so you detest unexpected guests. A hostess detests unexpected guests, and that's again an intensity of a feeling. And that intensity again is compared with the poet's love. And of course, through the poem, he only tries to affirm that his love, in comparison to all these things, which seem to give you intensity of those actions in those situations, is more. In the next stanza, he draws a comparison between his love and the sting of a wasp. Okay, this is where I said some of embarrassing kind of experiences come into picture. And his love is compared to the sting of a wasp. Wasp is known to give a subtle but a sharp sting. And subway, what is subway? Maybe here you'll have to tell the students that it's a local underground transport system in New York and not the burger as known in the city of Bengaluru, which gives jerks occasionally, right? So, and the need of a crutch for a beggar. So these are the comparisons he brings in this stanza, which are compared to love. And then, no doubt, that his love is more intense compared to all these. And look at the one that can actually make you squirm, that is the hangnail irking. So it's a very sharp and subtle emotion that a person can feel when you have that small toenail at the end of your toe, if it gets stuck somewhere, maybe to your dress or your bed, you do realize that sharp pain, and the sharp pain intensity of it is compared to the love that poet has for his lover. And maybe these are things unheard of, or things that most of us have experienced but have never expressed, right? So things that find expression in Nash are the experiences of common people which have not been expressed owing to maybe their own inhibitions or sometimes prohibitions from the society. Right. He swears by the stars above and below. Look at the pun on the word stars. Stars above is understood, stars below. So these are the stars below, Bollywood stars or Hollywood stars, you know how, in that sense. So he swears by the stars above and below, or it can even be a reference to the so-called important people who have a star image in life. If such there be, he says, punning on the word stars, he brings one of the most complicated comparisons at the end of the poem. Here, he compares his love to the kind of anger or loathe or detest that the courts have for perjurious oaths. Perjurious, that is false testimony or false oaths that the court or the judicious system actually abhors, right? So he says he compares his love to the loath that the courts have for perjurious oaths. And you find how that's how much I love you rings like a refrain in the poem. So in appearance, the poem has the quality of a lyric, and with its rhyme, with the rhythm that it has and the use of refrain, it sounds more like a song. So this is the poem, which of course we intended to give a different kind of a poem to our students, because they are so much used to reading sonnets or odes, classical poetry, or even modern poetry. But then when it comes to our text, this is my observation as well, when it comes to our text, we find very less of humor in it. Why not expose? Why not expose students to good sense of humor? Because that not only keeps them alert and active in their seats in the classroom, at the same time, language learning or literature learning class will be made more enjoyable, isn't it? So what we miss there in many of the texts, of course, this was the kind of talk I had with my team members when we did our Insights 3, that is last semester. And we, in fact, wanted to prescribe the play Suppressed Desires, which speaks of psychoanalysis and which has a lot of humor built into it. And of course, there is a humorous message at the end of the play. So with all these considerations, we prescribe the play Suppressed Desires. So I think because that is the age when we try to maybe understand our students and their needs and try to weave in our intentions and purposes, that would gel better. And that can have a better impact on them rather than being too didactic in a class where you just tell them, okay, this is what you have to learn and you have to learn it in this manner, as I suggest. So this kind of didactic or dictatorial attitude in a classroom may not work, according to me. Okay, so we'll take up the next poem, and maybe all doubts or clarifications we can have at the end of the session, where we have question and answer session in the last 15 minutes of this webinar. To the others, So in contrast to the theme of To My Valentine, where we spoke of the joyous mood or optimistic or hopeful uh, aspirations of the poet, the intensity of love that he expresses to his lover, here we have a sad poem, of course, sad and made much more sad because of the kind of references that the poet gives in the poem. To the Others by Jack Davis. Jack Leonardo Davis, who was born in 1917 and lived up to 2000, was an Australian Aboriginal playwright, poet, and Indigenous activist. He was born in Perth, Western Australia, and identified with Noongar tribe. His works include themes of Aboriginal life and Aboriginality. Perth is such a beautiful place, and till today, it is a place with a grand greenery. And no wonder that the Aboriginal tribes, and the two we are speaking of a time, maybe 1.5 or 2 centuries ago, during those times, it should have been much more green and much more of a beautiful place without industrialization or even without modernization. So his works include themes of Aboriginal life and Aboriginality. He also dwells on relationship between cultures. And here, Aboriginal culture and the white man's culture, European culture. One such poem here is To the Others, and its original title was Aboriginal Australia. The original title of this poem, To the Others, was Aboriginal Australia. This is a poem that focuses on the European influences upon Aboriginal life. Let me read the poem and then maybe we can go into the discussion of it. To the Others, you once smiled, a friendly smile, said we were kin to one another. Thus with guile for a short while became to me a brother. Then you swamped my way of gladness, took my children from my side, snapped shut the law book. Oh, my sadness, at Erakala's plea denied. So I remember Lake George Hills, the thin stick bones of people, sudden death and greed that kills, that gave you church and steeple. I cry again for Warara men born from kith and kind, and I wondered when I would find a pen to probe your freckled mind. I mourned again for the Murray tribe, gone too without a trace. I thought of the soldiers' diatribe, the smile on the governor's face. You murdered me with rope, with gun, the massacre of my enclave. You buried me deep on McLarty's Run, flung into a common grave. You propped me up with Christ, red tape, tobacco, grog, and fears. Through the brutish years, now you primly say you are justified and sing of a nation's glory, but I think of a people crucified, the real Australian story. So here, the poet talks about two perspectives. One, the white man's perspective of Aboriginal Australia, and the other, the poet's own perspective of it, right? So there are two perspectives, as we can see, and we'll discuss them at length now. So this is a poem that focuses on the European influences upon Aboriginal life in Australia. So Aboriginal Australians are the various indigenous groups of people, and particularly of the Torres Strait Islands, which is a part of Queensland, America. And there were supposed to have been 500 tribes there. They have their own ethnicity and culture, very distinct from others. At the time of colonization in 1788 in Australia, people who belonged to diverse ethnic groups like these tribes were nearly 1.25 million. They are estimated at 1.25 million, and they were reduced to about 50,000 by 1920. In these years of colonization, the number of the Aboriginal tribes and the population of these tribes had become very less. Had come down to 50,000. And people there, these tribal people, died of sickness like smallpox. And you know how these tribal people lived in such healthy and pristine environment that they could not take in the infections brought by the European men. They had no immunity against them, and most of them succumbed to the diseases. And one of the major diseases that took toll on them was smallpox. And fights at the same time, massacres by the whites. The poem throws light on the opposition and the death that the European population brought with them to Australia. The poet uses an openly depressed tone to record the onslaught of the European settlers. The poet speaks of various historical events of Australia where the Aboriginals were killed and massacred. So you find the poem replete with references to Australian Aboriginal history. And talking about some of these references, the Erakala people. These Erakala people are the creators of the bark petition, which is said to be a document that the Erakala tribe had prepared in order to assert their Aboriginal land rights, prepared by the indigenous Australians. And it was after a long struggle. Many of them, of course, were killed, and there were a lot of protests, fights, and finally it got recognized by the government, by the parliament in 1963 in Australia. So that's the reference that he makes, Aboriginal land rights, as against the white man's control over the entire land of Australia. And you have a reference to Lake George Hill's incident. So this Lake George Hill incident is said to be a fight between the whites who were in power and the Aboriginal people who had lived on the banks of this river, a freshwater lake that it was, for hundreds of years. So Aboriginal people had lived on the banks of this freshwater lake, while the whites wanted to usurp the land. And so a fight ensued between them. This is referred to as Lake George Hill's incident, which again resulted in the killing of a lot of tribal people. And the Warara men, Warara in Australian Aboriginal language means warriors. And these warriors who were taken away from their homes, from the kith and kin, as it says in the poem, and who were used by the white government and the whites to serve their purposes. So though Warara men is the warrior tribe which was used up by the white settlers. And the Murray tribe, you have a reference to Murray tribe there. This tribe of people are the people who lived in the Murray River Valley. So people who lived in the Murray River Valley were called the Murray tribe. And this region is said to be the region that had a heavy population, a very dense population of the tribal people. And you have McClarty's Run. McClarty's Run is also a reference to the massacre of an aboriginal tribe as they fled from the battle. So McClarty's Run, there was a battle between the whites and the aboriginal tribes, and the tribal people tried to run away to safety from the battle, and that is referred to as the McClarty's Run. So with all these references, you find how the European settlers had tried to dominate the aborigines and also usurp their land. And as the poet himself says, let's go to this last stanza in the poem, which gives out the kind of exploitation that was done during their rule in Australia. He says, you murdered me with rope, with gun, the massacre of my enclave. You buried me deep on McClarty's Run and flung into a common grave. So that was the what kind of burial given to people who died in the battle. They were given a common grave, just dumping the dead bodies into the common grave. And you propped me up with Christ, red tape, tobacco, grog, and fears. So by exploiting the tribal groups, the white settlers there tried to establish their own church, their religion, and tried to utilize the resources for their gain. And at the same time, exploiting the population there, the tribal population, and there are also instances where the Aboriginal tribal women have been raped and exploited, sexually exploited by the white settlers. And then disease and the lordly rape through the brutish years of their rule. So this was how the European settlers exploited the Aboriginal tribals. And now you primly say you are justified and sing of a nation's glory. So this is an angry question hurled at the European settler. What do you call of Australia now? You say Australia is a nation ruled by the Queen till today. Yes. And it speaks of nation's glory, and according to the white man's perception of it. According to the European perception of it, it is a glorious nation. But what is it according to our poet, Jack Davis, who is an aborigine himself? But I think of a people crucified. So when you look at the present and say Australia is a nation which has reached its glory, and maybe they take the credit for it, the European settlers, but the poet is concerned with the sacrifices made, with the kind of exploitation, massacre, and deaths that have happened before Australia could come to this point. Therefore, he says, I think of a people crucified, and that is the real Australian story. What is the real Australian story? Let's not mess up with history, and let us not write history according to our convenience. I think it has been happening, not just with Australia, with India or any other nation. And during the imperialist rule, you know, the kind of manipulative history that was written. Let's not go into that. But then here he is talking about how it is a nation, it is a population that has been crucified for the sake of this glory of Australia. And that is the real Australian story. And it is this message that he tries to put across in his poem. There is a somber message of a racist inability to comprehend the culture of another that resulted in violence and mutual disrespect with a lasting impact. And this is well brought about in the poem. And when he talks about the European culture, you can see that sense of pride, sense of maybe self-dignity in the poet when he says, as an aboriginal culture, the people had their own way of life, and maybe he compares it with the white man's culture as well. For you, maybe you had a different culture and a way of life, but you didn't really acknowledge the fact that we are also a culture, but with a different way of life, different beliefs, notions, practices, and rituals. So you didn't really acknowledge this culture or respect the culture, and that resulted in violence. When you tried to dominate over us, we protested against you and you massacred us. And ultimately, you now sing your own glory, which is not the truth. It's not the truth. The story of Australia is that millions of people have been exploited, killed, and their lands taken over by the British settlers. So this is the message he wants to give. Maybe this is also an attempt to set right the story of history written by the European settlers. Then he says, as he finally says, the bloody past cannot be covered. Yes. So the past has been bloody, it has been violent, it has been full of protests and killings, brutal murders have taken place. But then let's not dwell on that, because time passes by, and at least now, let us realize that we are two different cultures, and let us treat each other with mutual respect. So he says, the bloody past cannot be covered, but reconciliation can happen. You have to accept, reconciliate with it, and move forward. So the poem is about oppression and resistance to oppression, which is brought out in a very poignant manner by Jack Davis. So with this, I think I'll conclude my talk, and the session is now open for questions.
It was a very comprehensive session, what you did. We'll take up the questions now.
Yeah, sure.
If there are any questions, either you can post it in the chat box or question answer session box. As of now, I can see no questions yet. Does anybody have any doubts regarding how to go about any of the other poems of the text or the language part of it? Sheila ma'am, I just wanted to ask you a thing as to how to go about with the language part of it, ma'am.
Okay, fine.
You've included emails, CVs, and interview skills. So, can you reflect on that for a few minutes?
I didn't get the question actually. There was some kind of problem.
Okay, can you reflect on the language part a bit? Only a bit, as an email or CV or something like that.
Besides 4 language part? Sure, sure. 1 minute, let me take out my text. Okay. Coming to the language part of the text, we start off with jumbled sentences, then formal email writing, resume, interview skills, book review writing. And these are the 5 components of the language section. And jumbled sentences. Of course, when we prescribed jumbled sentences, we did think about whether it's going to overlap with rearrangement of sentences, which we had already given in the first semester. But it is not to be so. There was a question in the previous webinar as well regarding this. This is not rearrangement of sentences. This is more of picking out the right sentences and sequencing them, right? Whether they write it in the paragraph or not is a different question. So that we are not going to focus on in fourth semester insights, right? So here in jumbled sentences part, we see how there are 6 sentences given and the first sentence is fixed. And the other 5 sentences that the students will choose will have to be sequenced properly and put one below the other. That is all about it. So picking out the relevant sentences and putting them down in the right sequence. And this particular section is given with the intention of preparing the students for competitive exams, wherein logical thinking is given a lot of emphasis. And then we have formal email writing. So email writing, as you know, is a very important skill that is required of our students these days. And in the world, which is based on information, communication, and technology, and when there is soft communication that takes place, of course, they need to know the etiquette of email writing. And therefore, we thought email writing should be taught to them. Then we have resume and cover letter. We can't really undermine this skill at all. And even though we do know how we have been emphasizing on writing resumes and cover letters for a long time now, because as I have seen in the PU syllabus as well, they have a section on resume and cover letter. And then coming to first year degree, they have it. And now, again, in the second year degree, we have repetitively been prescribing it as a skill to be learned. And here I get reminded of how we have been teaching them a lot of items, grammar items repeatedly, say like it could be verbs, it could be active and passive sentences or speech, indirect speech or direct speech, which are said to be building blocks of language. And we don't ask ourselves how many times we have taught them all these skills. And at the end of it, we do know how much of it gets learned in spite of repeated. So with all these things in mind, we thought resume and cover letter have to be a part of the language component of this semester, and more so for the reason that this will be the last semester for them to learn English language. Because third year, they will not have their general English. And therefore, we also, one more reason here is that now that they are going to pass out as graduates, this is the basic skill required of them. And they need to know the differences between maybe a biodata or a resume and a curriculum vitae, how to write each one of them and when to use them, etc. But then coming to this particular unit from the point of view of examination, this question has also been there for a long time now, as I know. When once we ask our teachers to teach resume writing, of course, the first question is whether it should be written in block method or indent method or in the bullet format, etc., etc. Right? We do teach them whatever is appropriate, the appropriate format that is given in the text. And that's how it has to be in the given format here. And they must learn to write the letter like this without fail. Then you have interview skills. So in interview skills, we have spoken about the kind of conventional interviews and group interviews and competency interviews, the different kinds of interviews, assessment interview, because we live in the age of corporate world. And whether students get into the corporate world or any other associated or related area to the corporate world, these are all the things that need to be known to them. And how to face an interview becomes a skill that has to be dwelt upon. And finally, of course, book review writing. Book review writing is said to be a new skill that we have emphasized on. And the intention behind prescribing this particular skill or section in the language component of the book is that we wanted the students to learn to respond and react to what they have learned, whether it is a short story or a poem. They do study different forms of literature, right? And maybe in our classrooms, when we teach them, they just get used to our analysis of it. And sometimes it's very few students who actually come up with their responses and their perspectives. Sometimes it does happen in optional English class, but not much in a general English class, where it is just considered as a session to learn whatever skill is learned, whatever skill is prescribed, and then finally, what's the kind of marks that I can get out of it is the kind of perspective that the students have. So here we thought this is just one initiation, right? There is one initiation that has to be given to them into book review writing. Whatever short stories or essays or plays that may read as a part of the prescribed syllabus, or maybe even outside the prescribed syllabus. If some of them are in the habit of reading, maybe they can always react to it. And how to review a book. The basics of it have been discussed in this unit. Therefore, we thought this skill is necessary for them, and there can be language enthusiasts, literature enthusiasts in our classes, even in commerce stream. So they can actually make use of it, maybe in a better way. And for others, maybe it will help them to go through the text and also react to it in their own subjective manner. So, in fact, when we thought about book review writing, we did have a doubt as to how to test them in this skill. Testing them in this skill would be difficult because students may have read certain books and the teachers may not have read those books that the students have read. So, which book should the student review? So in order to ward off this kind of a problem, we thought we can just give them questions and ensure that they answer the questions. It's a very small attempt, I must say, but let us see how it works. It's introduced on an experimental basis, I have to admit. Sorry for the surrounding noise. There seems to be a big noise behind me.
Thank you, ma'am. There is one more question. In jumbled segments, you mentioned odd one out. Will it be same in the examination?
Yes, it will be similar to this. It will be like this. So this is the pattern in which the question has to be asked, even in the examination.
Right now, I think that's the question. Let me also check. That's it, ma'am, for now. Katyayani, ma'am?
Very useful and insightful session. Now I would like to call Usha ma'am to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Katyayani ma'am. I think we've come to end of a session which was important in many ways. I think ma'am has given not just an overview, but also has given us insights into what kind of perspective from which we should be addressing these texts, how students can benefit from these texts, and also the language part of it, how we have to go about teaching it, and what could be our approach in doing so. The two poems that she discussed in detail really gives us an insight into the ways in which poetry need to be analyzed and reached to the students. Ma'am, it was an extremely useful hands-on kind of a session with you. Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you on behalf of our college, our principal, as well as the Department of English, and also the students who are going to benefit from your session. Thank you so much, ma'am, and we hope to interact with you in future also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila ma'am, for that very insightful, useful session and for having accepted our invitation and gracing the FDP for it. And to all the participants, the feedback form for this session is already been posted. Shruti ma'am, can you repost now? Yeah. So kindly give us the feedback on this particular session.
I think, ma'am, there are many feedback saying that it was very insightful and very useful session in the chat box.
Huh.
A few participants were asking for text also, which I gave in the question and answer thing. Yeah, I think we can conclude, Akhila ma'am.
There were actually some, queries about textbook availability for all those participants who asked about textbook availability. It is available on the website of Bengaluru City University under the heading Faculty of Commerce and Arts, Commerce actually. So you can refer to it. Yeah, Shruti ma'am, kindly repost the link.
I think we can post it even on the WhatsApp group. That's what many Muslims are suggesting.
Hilipa? The session will be open for 5 to 10 minutes so that they can go to the feedback link and start filling in the form.
But they say they can't see any feedback form here.
It is posted in the chat box. Just ask them to scroll up, and I have messaged also right below it
Please.
saying that this is the
Yeah,
feedback.
please, participants, can you scroll up and find the link there? It's not in the chat box, Antidara.
No, it's very much there. We request everybody to kindly scroll up quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, you have to go up quite a bit. Just after the YouTube link, I'm sure you would have noticed that. Right after that, you can see that there is a feedback form. If you could kindly, scroll up and more detailed look, probably you will be able to see it.
Or can we repost it? No? Post it in the chat box as well. That's what they are asking.
Okay, probably it can be reposted.
Yeah, we are reposting it. Okay. Yeah. I should.
They're asking if you can post it on the WhatsApp also.
Okay, Usha ma'am, my the laptop's battery is running low. Can you just copy it from there and repost it?
Yeah,
Usha ma'am?
Yeah, I'm doing.
That's what even some messages, I'm getting few messages also.
Participants, we will repost it and the session will be open for another 10 minutes.
Yeah, there you go. To all the
I
panelists.
think they have to give it to all the attendees, ma'am. I think it's only for the participants. There's some kind of a. Can you see the link now, participants? Can you please?
Can you see it now?
Yeah. Okay. Now kindly fill it up and yeah. Yeah. It's for all the attendees. Yeah. Yeah. And tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we have a session by Dr. N.G. Narsimhan, who is going to speak on All My Sons, Arthur Miller. So participants kindly join in at 4 o'clock, and the session will go on till 5:30. The BCom fourth semester BCom textbook, All My Sons, by Arthur Miller. Professor N.G. Narsimhan sir will be speaking on that. He would be a resource person for the tomorrow, the third day FTP.
Dear participants, the session will be kept open for another 10 minutes for you to fill in the feedback form. As and when you finish filling in the feedback form, you can drop out of the session.
Hello.